The European season is now finished, and the number one question on all Sorare scouts and managers' lips from all over the world is, what should I be doing to get ready for the Champion Europe competition, which is the top 5 leagues across European football on Sorare Fantasy Football ahead of next season? And we're going to be covering everything you need to know ahead of the new season in the video today. And to do that, I had to call upon a man that knows a thing or two about a thing or two. He is world renowned for knowing his onions, and that is the one, the only Harry Trades. Harry, my man, good to see you.
Good to see you, mate. Yeah, thank you for having me on the channel and the video.
Yeah, should be a good one. And, you know, me and you were getting together, just sorting out some content, videos, streams, all that good stuff. And, you know, we're all sorting out stuff for our galleries coming into the new season in this summer period. And there's lots of different ways to do it, depending on what clubs you've, you know, kind of got built into your Sorare club and what you see yourself doing in the new season, because every manager now is redesigning and rethinking about what they've been doing, because the whole thing is going to be totally different. There's no avoiding it. And, you know, we're going to be doing this over 2 videos. We're going to be talking about Champion Europe specifically in this video here today, but we'll also be doing another video that you'll see on Harry Trades' channel, which will be linked in the description down below. And we'll be focusing in on, you know it, under 23s, the Wonder Kid division. So plenty to go through across both videos. Don't forget to like and subscribe, share, retweet, and all that good stuff. And get into the comment section on this one. Me and Harry want to know, and anyone else who is green around the gills, still new to the game, is going to want to hear in the comment section what any of your top tips are getting ready for the Champion Europe competition, no matter what the scarcity in the new season coming up. But yeah, Harry, we had a wee bit of a brainstorming session, and there's a few like key pillars of this competition that stand it out from being totally different to all the other competitions, whether it be on the pitch, off the pitch, in the marketplace. You know, so many different elements are going on here. But yeah, Champion Europe does stand distinctly different across the rest of them, doesn't it?
Yeah, big time. Like you said, we were chatting, and I think the first thing that kind of came into our mind was it's so different from challengers and contenders in that like you can't cheat the division as far as like playing in season goes. Every other contenders and challengers both have summer leagues, and so you can combine a J League or a K League in season stack with some European cards that play in Austria or wherever, right? You can kind of cheat the system in a way. Whereas in Champion, all 5 leagues play at the exact same time. And so going into this August, like new season cards are just going to be from the new season. Like there's not going to be any leftovers like you would see and some overlaps in the other competition. So yeah, it's a weird time because this is the first time ever this has happened as far as like them introducing the in-season abilities of cards. And like we know now from last week's announcement, they basically told us that they are going to mint cards prior to the season starting for those European leagues, which I think is massive. I guess it does change things in a way because people can get their squads ready, get their collection bonuses in for their collections, and yeah, it just does breathe a new dynamic to the game.
Yeah, for sure. Because all the cards will be going on sale at the same time. And, this is something to kind of tackle from 2 perspectives. I guess the first one is like, if you're listening to this, you've been playing Sorare last season, certainly, if not further back into the past than that. And you will have like a gallery already. You'll have a strategy. You'll have a couple of teams maybe on the go. And again, one of the most common questions I see on your streams and on mine is like, what do you do with your classic cards? I really enjoyed the in-season stuff, but my in-season cards are now going to go classic, and that whole dynamic that runs around it. And in terms of how it affects people, it is totally different, and it's one that I've really struggled with. I was kind of evaluating this in a different way because I had like classic cards, like that are long-standing classic cards that will be classic cards next season, the same as all the in-season stuff. And I'm still kind of weighing up, what to do with the rare part of it. I'm playing across 2 scarcities, rare and super rare. So like with the rare one, it's definitely something that I was trying to weigh up for a long time, as we spoke about in a lot of the deadline shows. Like, how good of a team do you need in classic is a big question, I think, isn't it?
Big time. I think, the dynamic's a little bit different in Champion, and there's a bit of a luxury in that we are getting 2 new competitions between La Liga having its own native league comp, as does Bundesliga. So, if you did have quite a few classic Champion cards from this previous season going into next season, if they are spread across those top 5 leagues, well, 3 of those leagues, Prem, Bundesliga, and La Liga, have their own comp. So you can kind of fit those cards in where they fit. Whereas, you might not have 3 full teams worth right now, but at least you might have a base. Whereas, for for challengers and contenders, that's not the case. They're not getting any like native leagues. They're not getting any standalone leagues, and so that sort of double utility for the 3 top leagues out of the 5 within Champion makes those cards a little bit more lucrative. And that is going to come with some of its own problems, like we'll definitely get into with transfers and whatever. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation, and I think, yeah, it all depends on how many classic cards you've been playing this year. Did you play 3 classic lineups and 3 in season? So effectively, you were playing 6 teams. It doesn't matter whether that was limited or rare. Next season, you're only going to have 3 classic slots for each of those competitions. You've just got to kind of hope that those in-season cards that you were playing fall nicely into maybe the La Liga native or maybe the Bundesliga native, in that you can play more than 3, because you can have 3 in Champion Classic, you could have 3 in La Liga Classic, you could have 3 in Prem Classic, and 3 in Bundesliga Classic. So you could have 12 classic champion cards, effectively 12 teams. Sorry, like I said, that is we don't have that luxury over in contenders and challengers. So there is a bit of leeway with like players who just play Champion, I think, over this last season, and it kind of proves, because they are the most expensive cards, not for that reason alone, but that is probably baked in somewhere.
Yeah, you make a great point about that, because if you've got the in-season classic dynamic in your club at the moment coming out of the 23-24 season, and like you said, you've got 6 slots there, but then that same roster of players can only fit into 3 all of a sudden. But if you were league specific in one of those 3 that get their own competition, then you can still use all 6 of your lineups. But what you would be doing, instead of playing in season and classic in the same competition like Champion, you would then have a classic Prem team, and then your rest of your in-season Prem cards or whatever could then facilitate a classic champ team. So you could, if you're league specific, if you can actually use that as a bit of a relief thing, then I think that relieves a bit of the pressure on, like, oh, I've got too many cards now for playing. If you bought all Serie A French cards, basically is when you're going to be in, or if you don't have a strong enough contingent of one league, is when you'd maybe be in that problem. And then I think when it does come to the question of what do I do with my classic or my or I want to play in season, or do I buy classic cards now and all this kind of thing, like, I do think that focusing on the league that they're in does help you make that decision a little bit easier in terms of what cards are worth hanging about, because like we mentioned at the tip off, like, it's very different in terms of the calendar coverage that it gets. It doesn't play 12 months of the year, but when it does play, it actually has the most amount of availability if you play your cards right. If you build the team, with enough finesse in terms of positions and leagues and stuff like that. So I do think, yeah, if you have had the league focus in mind already, and even the first thing that came to my mind when you said that, Harry, was like, if you did a Prem in-season team and like a champ in-season team, but your champ in-season team is La Liga, then next year you've got a classic in 2 leagues anyway. You're not actually losing any utility. You're just kind of putting them into different competitions. So I think that's definitely an interesting dynamic that I don't know if a lot of people have wrestled with, but it's definitely it should be something that helps you into your decision making.
Yeah, 100%. I think on that sort of in-season or classic, sort of dilemma now. Yeah, if you've got tons of classic cards, well, we all do. Effectively, no one has an in-season champ card at this point.
Yeah,
And
that's
so, yeah, like, they don't exist, right? We're out of season. The leagues are all done after this last weekend, and so, yeah, it comes down to that thing of like, okay, well, I have, I don't know, £1,000 worth or £100 worth of champ, classic cards right now. I want to play in season when it comes to August time, and they're obviously going to mint, pre-August. So let's just call it July. I want a nice sort of cash balance to build out some in-season stacks, teams, whatever. What is the ratio going to be on that? That's one thing that's on my mind. It's like, how much does a in-season Rodri go for on July 15th, for example? Like, let's just say it goes for £2,000, as a ballpark number. Okay, well, what is that ratio? How much does the classic Rodri go for at that point? And like, I think that's what you've got to kind of wrestle with any player. That he's just obviously an example of, like, yeah, if you really want to play in season and you're not looking to put new money into the game, like how much of a haircut are you going to take on selling champ cards now that are obviously they're not in season, they're not playing, so they're right now they're at their lowest point of utility in the game. Like you cannot
Yep.
field them. Okay, we have Euros, so there is like a few weird like things
Yeah.
that come into that. So a few people's prices or a few card prices are going to be higher than like they would be if they didn't have the Euros. But yeah, I think that dynamic is something that we're not going to know, obviously, until the new cards are minted. But I think you just got to kind of weigh up in your head, like, do I really want to take an X amount of hit on, like, how many Rodri Classic cards would you have to sell to make up for buying the new in season one, isn't it? Like that,
Yeah.
obviously back to ratios, but like if it's something stupid like 6x, like that is crazy. Like I wouldn't be selling 6 of my Rodri rare cards to go out and buy a new one, obviously, right? Nobody's going to do that. If it's double, meaning that I need to sell 2 of my Rodris right now for, I don't know, 500 quid each, and then the in season one is actually a grand. Could you make that up by, playing in season comps throughout the season if you buy in really early? Maybe. You have to try and obviously work, but you can't work out the EV, unfortunately, because we don't know the cash prizes in season for next year. And we don't know
Yep.
how much these cards are going to go for. So, we're dealing with a lot of uncertainties here, and nobody knows, right? This is why we're having the conversation. And I just think it's just really, really hard to work out. And especially with the Euros, that throws things even weirder, I think, because in a good way, it's a good thing. Because if you do want to offload some of your champ cards and you don't want to play the Euros, you're kind of in a nice spot where you might get a little bump in price on your players if they play for their respective country. So yeah, there's so many dynamics to go through over this next like month and a half period before we do probably start getting those new in season cards, pre-August.
What I was going to say back to you on that as well is like if you're talking about like selling 6 Rodris, like I suppose with the numbers we're talking about prices there, it probably is rare rather than limited. But I think the only people maybe in that situation would be like limited players. And with the, you do get one classic spot. So see, like if you are in
Right.
a position where you went all in season and you fancy going all in season again, then it totally makes sense to try and like keep. I would don't know. I would say if there's going to be 3 in season teams, you probably want 5 or 6 legacy classic cards to kind of hang on to out of your cull or your mass exodus that you have from the club going into the season, because they'll still have use and utility for you. And if you've got them at high XP levels, then the difference on the leaderboard versus the in season will be negligible for large periods of the season, depending on how it shakes. That does kind of tie into the collection game, I think, as well, because when it comes to classic, like I don't really feel too terrified about some of the lineups I've got going into like champion, which is maybe like a weaker region for me compared to like Celtic or whatever, because I've got some guys at 13, I've got some guys at 12, and I'm working on some guys getting at 14% at the rare level, certainly, because like, yeah, with your classic cards are going in season, what to do with them. Like part of it is understanding what's your opportunity to win. Like if you had lots of budget classic, budget in season stacks that could have paid in on one game week, and maybe some of them did already, there might be a bit of pressure on moving them out, because like them going into a classic situation, like part of the benefit you get in season is it's a smaller field. There only is 10 Allisons in existence, that are could be in season, but obviously you got the classic ones that could be the one in the squad element, so that's half the benefit and half the shield that you get from the in-season element, as well as going into a league specific thing as well. Like La Liga, I think will be probably the lowest scoring individual competition most weeks. I know Real, and it's mainly Real and Sorare. I don't think Barca really do kill it that often as a collective, but La Liga is not a high scoring league for the most part. In the Bundesliga, it will be like getting a defender and a keeper will be a nightmare, for example. So like you can have a bad one and it's not a problem, probably for the most part, in the Prem we've already got experience of, which is just kind of like you probably would need a stack of whoever wins 5 now, you're good, like if it's Newcastle, Aston Villa, Man City, Liverpool, whatever, Arsenal, of course. So they'll all have their own little kind of quirks, and it's understanding like champion will still be a bloodbath, particularly classic, I think. So you need to, if you do have XP, if you do have collection bonus, selling that or giving that up, could be something you regret in time, because getting that back won't be as easy, especially guys that have been playing for you and XP and up, and you've got that 4%, 5%, 3% there, whatever. So yeah, it's understanding how strong you could be against the field in season and classic with what you've got left over.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing to weigh up, isn't it? Like, if you are going to sell, the Man City collection outside of Rodri, or, if you have a couple of fringe City players that don't actually play, but they contribute to, Rodri's collection bonus that you want to use next season in season, so that you can use one classic, of course. Like, is it actually worth selling them? Because that then dilutes your Rodri's power if we're talking about, XP against the field. And it's just like, well, what is the opportunity cost there? Like, is that 50 quid that you're going to make from selling those 6 or 7 players, is that going to outweigh the maybe 2% that you lose on him? That's kind of what you've got to weigh up, right? So, like, we're talking about selling classic cards for in season, but that comes with consequences. Like, that does, it can come with big consequences if we're talking, lesser in the the XP on some of these big cards that you do want to keep. So yeah, the collections in general just throw this dynamic out now that, like, kind of makes you, or kind of forces you. Sorare have kind of forced us into, like, not wanting to sell our cards in a weird way. Like, that's kind of what they want. I know they take a 5% fee on the secondary, so, like, I get it, but, like, it is an interesting one. It kind of makes me feel like Sorare just want us to keep those old collections and then obviously buy with new money, right? That's kind of the obvious thing. Like, this is a business. It does need new money coming in, and it's just an interesting one. Like, is it even worth trying to sell some of those fringe collection pieces to to bolster your in season capabilities in the new season? I don't know if it all depends. Like, it's just really hard to work out right now.
Yeah, because I was just thinking there as we were talking, like, as well, like, if you do have 5% collection bonus, you've basically bought in-season bonus for life, So if you've got a
Yeah.
Rodri on 15%, no one's ever going to come anywhere near you, Like, you will always have the best shot at Rodri delivering for you, or insert, smasher, whoever it
Mhm.
is at
Yeah,
whatever
yeah.
region. But also we're talking champion specifically, but because there is, like, in these leagues and in these regions, there's fewer of them. They're more expensive. They're harder to come by. Do you want a classic one? Do you want a in-season one? It's something a lot of people wrestle with, but there's a lot of detail that does kind of circle around it. And I think, like, to maybe bring it into kind of the next point that we had kind of lined up here, we've kind of touched on it once or twice, but in the in-season, the coming in season, there will be a totally different mechanism of distribution from Sorare in terms of how you can buy them, how early you can buy them, maybe how many they'll have sold before. Well, definitely, how many they'll have sold before kickoff on match day 1, because typically we don't see the fuckers till match day 3 or something. So there'll definitely be way more from day 1 as a result. But I think you know what I mean, like, way more in general, like, for the early opening kind of salvo of the season. And we don't know totally how it will work yet, but I think we imagine it to be like a run of half a dozen auctions and then an instant buy allotment maybe goes off the back of that or something. So you're going to, especially for ahead of match day 1, which is going to be, peak price and peak, deployment potential, for cards. So it's going to be, I think, more dangerous than ever, just throwing your whole wallet at day 1 buys. I've done it a few times myself. It's a lot of fun, and as long as you're getting guys you like, you don't always regret it. But
Mm.
you do see their value go down. There's just there's no getting away from it. And this season, undeniably, there will be, like, a rolling drop of value on in seasons throughout the season because of not just what we know. Like, from match day 1, you've then got 38 games to win versus match day 12 or whatever. But because they will be pumping a lot of sales out much earlier, so then subsequently throughout the year, they're not going to be that many. And maybe that holds the value a little bit. I don't know.
What if in an ideal world, or maybe it's not an ideal world, I'm not a mathematician or a game economist, but, like, surely they'd want to sell all their mints. So what is it? 60 cards let's call it rare for now. So there's 100 cards minted every year. Let's call it 60 get sold and 40 rewarded. Is that right? Or is it
I
50?
would have
It's not
said
50-50, is it?
I would have said 55-45. I think we've got
Okay.
40 for rewards. I don't know what they're keeping for boxes,
Right.
as
Yeah, but let's
well.
call that
So
rewards as well, though, if that,
yeah, okay,
yeah,
fair.
like that has to fall in. Yeah, let's just call it, I
Fair.
don't know. Let's just call it 50, I don't know, 55-45. Let's say if they auction 55 cards before the season starts. I know that sounds crazy, but just hear me out. At that point, then like all in anticipation for that game week 1 of 38 in the Premier League. Like, I don't foresee like one of 100 is obviously going to go for an extortionate amount, right? But like, I don't foresee like 10 of 100 being that indifferent to like 40 of 100 if they're all sold before the start date of the first game. Especially if it's like a remember, like for the Premier League, they did like an in season, like a special. They've done it for the K League, the J League, like the 3 first game weeks. They like bump up the prizes. Imagine if they do that and sell all the supply before the first game of the season. I don't. I'd bet decent money that like yeah, the 10th mint or maybe like 10th to 15 mint wouldn't be that different in price to like the last the 45 to 55 mint if they're all minted before that first game week. Because I think everyone's gonna want to play it, and I just don't, because the first game hasn't happened. I can't see. I know demand is gonna obviously decrease because they've sold more, right? And supplies sort of be being distributed. But I really think they could just really like level out the graphs of those cards if they were all sold before the season, and then that then props up the secondary market. Because if I win an in-season Rodri within that game week 2, game week 3, I'm going to be able to sell that for an absolute ton because there's none on the market in season wise. Sorare take a bigger cut of that as well, by the way. So
But they
it's in their best interest for there to be less competition on the secondary, and they've sold all their like first mints. They're done selling. Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, they don't actually lose out on anything in that way.
They do love to sell somebody off the back of 100, but in that element of a price can spike on them all of a sudden. So I do, like, I'm with you in terms of the logic of it all, but I don't think they would like shoot their load. But I do think like there maybe there's going to be, although because again, as we're talking, I'm thinking like let's say they did have full allotment available, some of that will instant buy, maybe nobody instant
Which
buys,
is yeah.
you know. So like, is it all actually sold? Really?
I
Straight
think
away, you know.
I agree with you. Yeah, they probably don't do blow their load all the way, but like you said, they do love to sell a card on 100, or just leave that for the instant buy then. So out of every supply, there's 5 cards in a season, or 10 out of the 100, whatever, that are instant buy only. And those only go if they're obviously instant bought. And the chances of a card being instant bought most of the time is if one, there's no auction, which we're saying they've already sold all their auctions already. And all that's left throughout the duration of the season is 5 or however many, whatever the percentage is, of instant buys. That's the only way you can buy off Sorare during the season is through an instant buy, because that's where they're going to make a ton of money, in that like people just panic buy and FOMO kicks in, or you sell, or somebody sells on the secondary market. And I think the pressure then of those secondary market in season cards are so much, like they're just relieved, aren't they? Because there's just less competition. The only
Yeah.
people selling them are going to be Sorare's instant buy, which could be astronomical compared to what, maybe not astronomical,
Market.
but you know what I mean, 10 to 20, 30% more. That's the premium if you want an instant buy, of course, than the secondary. And like I said, if the secondary is propped up, they're taking they're still taking their 5%. So they'd prefer to get 5% of a grand than 5% of 500 quid, obviously. So it's like the only way that's going to happen is if there's less selling pressure. And the only way that's going to happen is if they've already sold all their supply. I think we're going to see. I'd be shocked if Sorare don't want to sell the majority of their cards before the season starts. I really, really do. I really,
Yeah.
really am. Sorry.
So again, I think part of the thing as well for getting ready into the champ season is like there will be that amount of availability. We do know that. Like my rule of thumb, whenever I wanted new cards, which hasn't really happened for a wee while, but the first 6, there's going to be 2 cards in the first 6 that go way cheaper than the other 4, you know. And sometimes it's 4 and 5, sometimes it's 2 and 3,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's 1 and 2, you know. It's weird, but in the first 6, maybe it's first 10. Now I'm talking about rares, but like there would always be, you know. So, but part of that is like you do want the cheapest entry point into a card because we know it's probably going to slide away across the season in terms of value wise. So, that's the main thing for like we do have a few unknown elements here, but it's the number one thing anyone listening to this I would always want to keep in the front of their mind is you will see the card go down in value if you buy day 1 or day 0, however you want to think of it as. It's unavoidable. So it's like it's do you and I know some people do want to play in season heavy, and I've seen people do it in lots of regions where they go and just buy the stack and go get the collection filled, which is great. But like at what cost do you want to do that? It's something you really need to agree with yourself long before it happens, because when it's out in front of you, you can talk yourself into anything, and it is real your money. So like, you know, get an agreement with yourself in terms of like a classic kind of cohort you can maybe bash against this, because you will need one class. Maybe it's your goalkeepers, maybe it's your captain, but you will need a classic element into your in season anyway. And yeah, I think like we've discussed over the last kind of points, there's definitely some counterweights and balances for what league have you got? Are you building do you have a collection bonus to hang on to? Will kind of help flavor that a little bit as well. And probably another one of the points I guess we would bring up, we've kind of touched on it again once or twice, but with the introduction of Bundesliga and La Liga, it does open up a lot more avenues to be a successful champion player, because maybe you've been playing champion for as long as it's been going, basically, and it is fucking hard to win in that division, even at the pro, even at back in the day, or plus or whatever we called it, and rare and limited when it came on. Super rare, fucking whatever, it's always been a hard region to smash in, because the best cards are relatively unattainable for the average player, no matter what scarcity you're in. Like the Mbappes and Vinnies and whatever are way overpriced on not overpriced, but way more expensive than the average person's budget for whatever scarcity they're kind of chopping about in. So you're always looking for those guys that are the corner cutters, like Griezmann does 75 plus 20 times a season, but rather than buy him, we buy three guys that in the aggregate, Moneyball style, still do 20, 70 pluses a season, but it's three guys and three teams, and you're just trying to buy it out in that sense. So with the introduction of Bundesliga and La Liga, it will be really interesting to see the pressure on the champion region itself, because, we've seen the success in Premier League. We've seen how, like, Brentford, like virtually every team that's around mid-table or better can have a couple of weeks in the sun, and it's maybe not going to be back-to-back concurrently, like 3 match days on the spin and then die off the season. But, and that kind of hope I think people have seen in the Premier League, people will be very interested in getting in the Bundesliga and in La Liga from the Wolfsburgs and the Stuttgarts. Maybe it is Stuttgart you get, and then they go to second in the league, that kind of thing. So, when it comes to these extra leagues opening up, what's your kind of thoughts, feelings, intuition with what happens to the actual champion segment?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, champion segment is definitely going to have Serie A and Liga and players. Like, we just know that for a fact. They cannot go anywhere else. Like, so, on paper, you're probably going to see, less Premier League, less Bundesliga, less the Liga cards in there. Does that, like, what does that actually change? Well, if you are playing champion, you're going to have to differentiate. Like, if you're playing champion and you've got Serie A / Liga and cards, then like, captain bonus and collection bonus are going to come in, heavily to those, to those, things in question. It kind of all depends on like how good the prize pool is compared to the Bundesliga, La Liga, and Premier League comps as well. Like, if champion itself is like way better, like, why, if you got Man City cards, Rodri's, whoever, De Bruyne's, Foden's, like, are you more incentivized playing them in champion? Yeah, you're up against more teams, more leagues, whatever, but your upside is there as well, because there's just more on the line as far as what you can win. And so I think it all depends. Like, a lot of these questions, get answered by knowing the prize pool, which obviously we don't. But yeah, we just, for a fact, all the champ is going to be full of Liga and Serie A cards. There's no getting around that. Like, we can't do much about that. That's just where they're going to live. It's just how many stragglers from Premier League, La Liga, and Bundesliga are going to come over. They might not even be stragglers if the prize pool is like way better than those three comps. So again, it all comes back to prize pool for me. But this then comes into the conversation of like, if you get a transfer, we were talking off before we recorded that, Alias Garcia, if he goes to buy Leverkusen, great, he's still champion, amazing. But if you were prepping for a La Liga only comp, and your whole strategy was, I want to play La Liga comp. You don't want to play champs. Well, then Alias Garcia, your best player, just moves from Spain to Germany. What do you do? Like, you know, that type of scenario is probably going to happen a lot over this summer, right? Where players go from Bundesliga to Prem, or, you know, vice versa. Like, that is something that you're going to have to navigate quite strictly, because like what, like you're in that situation right now, Quinn. I mean, you're best to speak on it. Like, you know, how does
Yeah.
that, what, not so much how does it feel, but what is your first thoughts? Like, how are you going to navigate it?
So yeah, I was hoping to kind of pivot into La Liga with the super rares, and then yeah, like you say, Aliesh going from one where I've got a goalkeeper to one where I've not got a goalkeeper is definitely a swift kick in the stones that is only just kind of setting upon me as we're talking completely, you know. But I think with it, it's a funny one because ideally, with your Serie A, your Ligue 1, and then your bits and pieces you might have from whatever, the apex thing is still to win an Mbappe Real Madrid card, a Jude Bellingham Real Madrid card, the best players in the Prem, Arsenal, City, Liverpool players, whatever your cup of tea is. And like, you know, Serie A and Liga are definitely going to be the budget route to go for that now, aren't they? Like full heartedly, like you can spine a team into champion with them. But I suppose what I can back, yeah, what the unknown part of it that I think we need to have some sort of preparation for coming into the season is like how much how many like wild cards do you need to supplement that? Like, could a Liga and stack actually? It's not PSG. Actually, like rein in the prizes consistently in champion. Could a Serie A team? The Serie A maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm being biased because they've got 9 European spots this year, but Serie A maybe feels a bit more possible potentially. Or do you need it to be supplemented with the likes of a Bundesliga midfielder like a Javi Simons or a Granit Xhaka, and you need a striker from Spain that's scoring 20, 30 goals or whatever to get it into the top end of the champion leaderboard. So I think, like, yeah, because again, it's understanding what you're trying to win. Because maybe you don't want to play Bundesliga Classic and just win Harry Kane is the best thing, or Musiala or Wirtz, whatever your thing is. Maybe you still, I know, I'd love a Real Madrid Mbappe, or I'd love a Man City Haaland, or a, you know, whatever it is you're after. So I think kind of what you're shooting for probably helps you decide on that a little bit. And for me, like specifically with the Aliesh, like it's mainly a problem for me because at Girona he's playing 95% of matches guaranteed over the season. You know, he's missing from 5 card yellows and pulling a hammy once in a while or something. But in Leverkusen, every weekend is a question now. You know, like, is he in or out? You know, maybe he's in all the time, but it's still going to be a fucking question for a long time. You know, and that's really the problem more than like a change in region if it goes against plan. I think if you're in champion, you do need to, even if you're going to be Bundesliga or La Liga, you do need to have that. We kind of spoke about it in one of the earlier points, but that's that release valve of champion to play your XS cards or your hodgepodge cards. Because if you've got, like I've mentioned before, like if you're buying into champion on a budget, trying to be cute, try to take an alternative route, it's really important to understand the composition of the squad. Like, who are you actually picking up? What are the players? What are the club renowned for in terms of their transfer policy or whatever? And like, so for example, if you look at my Leipzig collection, if we could rewind time and imagine I bought that as a Bundesliga outfit, and now you look at it and Guardiola's at Man City, Leimer's at Munich, which fair enough, whatever, and Kunku's at Chelsea, Forsberg is in America, Mukiele's in Paris and probably moving again. Andre Silva's at Real Sociedad. You know, so you're going to experience that anyway. With you know, if you bought Alias right now to get ready for La Liga next year, then it's really bad timing. But it is a fact of life of champion is it's a very active transfer market, and the top players generally stay in the top divisions. You know, maybe they stay like Leimer goes from Leipzig to Bayern, fine, no problem. You know, but if it's in Kunku and he goes to Chelsea, never mind he's injured, but if he goes, you know, then you need to be prepared for, well, he's now going to be my champion midfielder because I can't play in Bundesliga now. So I do think that you should have that. Maybe it can't be in your plans and in your club right now because this is another 3 goalkeepers. This is a whole other set of cards you'll need to satisfy that. But it's something that you accept you're going to gather. And, right, okay, I need to buy a goalkeeper now because Ali Ashes went and he could captain a team. So if I get a keeper, I've got a captain. And then let's see what else we can float around. So it might not be a bridge you want to cross right now, but I do think like if you are going to be league specific, you will need to have that champion backdoor for these incidentals.
Yeah, the safety net's a big thing, isn't it? And luckily you have that in Champion. You do not have that anywhere else on this game anymore. Basically, right? Like, if we're
Yeah.
being honest, Contender and Challenger don't have their own league specific regions or comp. So having that safety net is a really nice thing. Yeah, it still proves to be a bit of a headache in that the Aliesh example. But yeah, like you said, at worst you play him in champ. Like that is the answer. Whereas in Contender and Challenger, that doesn't exist. That answer isn't a thing.
Yeah, players could move anywhere from those regions, and it's like it's a totally different region you need access to, which is a bit different because the champion one you can double up your cards. You can just go, oh, well, maybe I'll just retreat the whole stack. Maybe I'll just go, hey, that's screwed it, but I can still play them together if I play them in this competition, and you just do that instead. But as like you've rightly said there, like if I look at my New York collection, I've got guys now in China, I've got guys in Brazil, I've got guys like it could be anywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah.
These in Celtic as well, it's the same. Guys go all over the world after some of these teams. So yeah, very different. And equally, like I mentioned, even with the Forsberg, you'll get that in Champion Europe because they are at the top of the food chain. So like when they move, it's to play more football. And generally, it's easier for guys at the top of the food chain to play more football slightly down the food chain, and sometimes that's in the same division. Sometimes it's next door in Spain rather than Italy or whatever. But sometimes it's Belgium or America or Saudi or something. So like there's always you need to be kind of prepared for that anyway. As well.
Yeah, I was just going to say like that isn't necessarily a bad thing in that like most times if a Forsberg goes from Leipzig to America, chances are he's going to hold up in value because like you said, he's going down the food chain to play more football, meaning that, he is on his day has been a world-class player. If they're moving to an easier league, like we've seen, Messi do it, whatever, like their value sometimes increases from being a champ player to go into be a challenger or contender. So yeah, you might not want to play that region, but as far as selling him on, you're probably not going to have too much of a worry doing that. And so that's again another baked in like plus, I would say, from just owning champ players, because if they do move down the food chain as far as contender and champion regions go and go play for a lesser team and play more minutes and play, and play in an easier league, like we've already said, like it's a bad thing because you have to sell him if you don't want to play those regions. But when we're talking about selling him, the chances are he's probably going to hold up in value quite nicely, if not even rise in some cases. It's obviously going to change, in a case by case scenario, but like that is another like funny like thing that maybe doesn't get talked about, or even like when you're buying a card, you don't think about that, especially for like an older player as well. You rarely see it like with your under 23s, for example. Like if you're buying an like a Mateus Tell, like you ain't buying him thinking that he's going to go to the MLS next year. That ain't going to happen, right? But if you're buying an Emil Forsberg for his last season in the Bundesliga, or like that's probably the good example for champ. Like the chances are he's probably going to go move to an easier league and play some good football and score very, very well, which means his price probably rises. And yeah, I think that's a really, just a fun dynamic in champ cards.
Yeah, there's something to be mindful of as well. If you've got already guys in your locker and you're thinking, okay, well, I'm set. The amount of wild transfers that happen, if you're not close, if this is news to you, be prepared. It won't be news to many people, of course, but you just never know. Like a rumor could come out tomorrow, and then a guy's holding a scarf the day after, and you're just like, how the fuck did that happen? Like, yeah, it's happened so many times. Or people go to jail, or they get missing, or all sorts of wacky stuff. So I think particularly more innocent things, but Champion has a lot more traffic towards it, and I think that does kind of bake in again some of the other elements we've spoken about, just in general for playing Champion coming into the next season. That really like owning the position is really important, like getting the collection bonus to a safe situation or a good situation or whatever, having the right amount of players in a squad where like you're not going to be overloaded and you had 6 entries available, now you've only got 3, you've got some sort of kind of balance to that. And probably the last thing we meant to bring up when we were going through with this, which is another huge kind of unknown, but we do have like a good amount of historical successes, as it were, with this kind of strategy. It's a big one that you're famed for, of course, Mr. Midweek. But the champion cards, as we know, have got the best access to Midweek because They're playing Europa League, Conference League, Champions League. Hopefully, there's a good amount of those games that they're playing against Belgian teams and Austrian teams and Rangers and whatever else it might be. Also, none of them want to play Celtic. We all know that. If you've been to Parkhead, it's widely feared. But midweeks come with headaches and they come with a bit of unknowns. Like, we're expecting special weeklies for the individual competitions, which is maybe a bit of a nerf because 22 seasons ago, Aston Villa this season, like, they went into midweeks, or maybe it was Aston, I can't remember the order of it, but there's always a midweek babe. There's a team that comes out and in the group stages, they win, 36-8 on aggregate across their group, and just every midweek, the team that's playing and they smash somebody and you get a good bit of joy out of it. But that was with like a cheap team in Champion or in All-Star. And now that will be like in the Conference League Special Weekly, which, I don't know if that's better or worse. It doesn't feel better.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it can't be better in that, like, prize pools now are probably going to be even more segregated than ever. Like, if we are talking special weeklies, well, they're probably going to need three. They're probably going to have a Europa League, Champions League, and a Conference League, let's say. We don't know that, but let's just argue they are. Well, then prizes get split between three competitions there, where before it was all segregated into, one, for example. So, yeah, that is definitely something to talk about because, yeah, the whole game has changed since then. Like your 20 example, Quinny, like that was when you could play them in Challenger Europe in the midweek, meaning that like they were basically like the only team playing in Challenger Europe because they were the only full stack. And like you said, they were playing in the Conference League against whoever and they didn't have cards. So, you could kind of clean up in that sense. Whereas that isn't a thing anymore. Like that whole Mr. Midweek thing, it's been nerfed / redistributed in ways that it's just not as lucrative anymore. So, having an Aston Villa for next season and they're playing in the Champions League, right? Like, do you want that? Like, do you want Aston Villa playing in the Champions League? From a utility standpoint, yes, they play more games, more chances to win, but ultimately they're still up against Real Madrid's that midweek. They're still up against PSG's, Dortmund's, Man City's, whatever. So, like, is it even that much of a benefit? I don't think it is. It's an IRL benefit. Like, yeah, great. If you're a Villa fan, you get to watch Champions League games. Yay. But from a ability to win cards on Sorare standpoint, I think it's a negative. And not only that, yeah, they'll probably play their best team in the midweek. Well, then on the weekend, Quinny, when they play in the Premier League, they're going to rotate. And that might mean losing more games of football because, as we know, those schedules are tough on any team. But yeah, especially Premier League teams. So we've seen Brighton absolutely suffer this year because they went into Europe and found out that their squads, getting injuries and rotations, it just didn't work. And I hope that doesn't happen to Villa, but most of the time it kind of does happen. And it just ends up being a net negative, I think, for having cards in those teams. So then that comes back to my question of like, all right, I was contemplating a Villa collection for next season, but should I, now that they're in Champions League? Yeah, on the surface, it's more utility, but more utility doesn't equal more reward wins. And that's just a fact that we have to kind of live with now.
Yeah, I think maybe the only exception will be the Champions League because the Champions League Special Weekly should have some stardust on it. It should be like, Champions League Special Weekly, big spotlight, big cash or big cards or, good stuff. And that probably only benefits Real Madrid, Man City, Bayern, the teams that. So the new Champions League format will be different, of course, for the Europa League and the Conference League. I don't think there's much change there yet, but I think they will change in line with the Champions League. But you get 8 games, 4 at home, 4 away. You don't play the same opponent twice, and you play teams in every seeding. So if you're a seed 3 team, you'll play 2 seed 1s, 2 seed 2s, 2 seed 3s, 2 seed 4s. Whereas before, you would never play somebody in your same seeding because you would be in a group of 1, 2, 3, 4, if that makes sense. So obviously having a seed 1 team, is the most advantageous because you'll play 2 tier 1 teams, which you probably weren't playing before anyway, but then you're playing 6, especially those tier 4 and tier 3 teams or seeds. I'm saying tiers, mad Sorare chat, but that's now 4 games against low ranked opponents versus 2, home and away against 1 team, home and away against 2 teams. So I do think the Champions League, if you're going for a premium team, is maybe the exception because, like you say, for Conference League and for Europa League, if we look at Villa, Leverkusen, these teams we've seen historically do well on Sorare and in real life in the competition, like they have a midweek team and a lineup and a weekend team, So And like Aston Villa didn't do great in the group stages this year. Like they lost a game. They had to I think the last 3 games they really had to push the boat out to qualify. Because they dropped points in the first 3 somewhere. So you don't often get a complete 6-game clean sheet, clean run, as it were. Yeah, it definitely brings more problems because it's like you say, you can't own a division as much anymore if it's low entries, and then the competition you're against now, it's like even if you played the 20 and like the All-Star, you could maybe win the Mbappe, which was the fabled pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But that's not even there anymore. Europa League team is now a Europa League team, but your Champions League team should be probably kicking a wee bit harder, I would think. Harry boy, it's been an absolute pleasure. For everyone that's enjoyed this, on screen now is me and Harry talking about the exact same thing, but under 23s ahead of next season. Don't forget to hit subscribe, like below, jump in the comments section, all that good stuff, and we'll see you over at Harry's place. Fist bump, take care.